Hi, the video that you're about to see was preceded by showing the audience a video from the New York Times called How I Had an Abortion at Home in Texas, which you can find on YouTube. We're going to put a link right here in a card. You can click on that or click down in the description to go watch that video from the New York Times, How I Had an Abortion at Home in Texas, so you get the context and then come right back to this video to watch the rest. Thanks.
The video makes it seem like much more legally problematic than it is. Most states make it pretty explicit that it may be legally problematic in some places for people to ship the drugs and things like that, but as far as a mother who's doing what that woman was, that it's perfectly legal to do a do-it-yourself abortion. The most common, as we saw in the video, the most common form of a do-it-yourself abortion is a medication abortion. But there are also what you've probably heard about, later term coat hanger abortions, which are also legal up to the moment of birth in pretty much every state. So that's why we need equal protection of the laws. Could a 27-year-old mother of a 1-year-old do what she did and poison them to death? Our laws prohibit that, as they should. But our laws allow what that young woman did, or not so young. What equal protection of the laws means, first of all, what does it not mean? What does equal protection not mean? It doesn't mean equal outcomes. When we talk about equal protection of the laws, we're not talking about equal outcomes, that everyone involved with an abortion should get the exact same punishment, no matter how much they're involved with abortion, no matter what their mental state is, no matter how much they know, no matter how much they may be pressured, right? We're not calling for equal outcomes, that everybody gets the exact same punishment who has anything to do with an abortion. We're not calling for equal punishments for people. We're not even calling for equal prosecutions, that every single mother or every single person involved with an abortion should all be prosecuted in every single case. Perhaps equal protection does not even mean equal due process procedures apply. Maybe some cases can have a heightened carefulness applied to them than others. But what does equal protection mean? In this instance, when we talk about abortion, equal protection of the laws means that the same substantive laws protecting our lives and the lives of other born people should be the same laws protecting the lives of people who are not yet born. That's what equal protection means. We don't really need new laws. We already have laws that prohibit homicide. We simply need to take away the exception so that way those laws protect preborn persons the same way they protect born persons. On the criminal side, we call these laws homicide code. On the civil side, we call these laws wrongful death statutes. Equal protection just means that the same justice system that protects my life, that protects your life from someone intentionally, knowingly, recklessly, or criminally negligently causing our death, that same justice system protects the life of the child in the womb. Abby Johnson, you may, if you're not familiar with her, she's a former Planned Parenthood clinic director. She used to work for Planned Parenthood and run one of their clinics in Texas. She's now a pro-life advocate. And if you've heard of the movie Unplanned, it's about her life. She recently came out publicly in support of equal protection. I'm going to read you what she wrote on Facebook. She said, "For many years, I held the position that women should never be prosecuted if they had an abortion once abortion is illegal. This is what I have heard from the pro-life movement since becoming pro-life for the past almost 13 years. I guess as a woman who has had 2 abortions, it sounded like the compassionate answer. I mean, I have murdered 2 of my children. What should my penalty be? When you have been in the abortion movement for many years and then suddenly find yourself pro-life, you want to do and say the right things. You want people to know that you are sincere about your conversion experience because My gosh, she says, it is so personal to you. On the topic of abortion, you want to especially be careful when talking about the care and protection of women because as a former abortion worker, I realized how poorly I had treated women for so long. My first revelation was realizing that allowing exceptions for abortion in cases of rape was actually not helping women. It was certainly not helping these innocent children who should not be punished because of the way they were conceived. So after much prayer, research, and actual discussion with those who had been conceived in rape and those who had conceived children in rape, I changed my mind. I became more consistent in my fight against abortion. We now find ourselves, continuing to quote Abby Johnson, we now find ourselves at a pivotal time in our movement. Abortion is about to be made illegal in more than half the states in our country. This was before the Dobbs case was released. I think for a long time it was easy to say, oh, we don't want to prosecute those who kill their babies, we will just prosecute the doctors. I used to say it, but now the time is here. Who will take responsibility for these lives? There will always be those who are willing to kill babies for money. The supply of back alley abortionists will never cease. So how do we stop back alley abortions? Well, how do we stop other crimes? Certainly the law is a deterrent. You must stop the demand. But there is also something else that I just couldn't ignore anymore, the logic. Are preborn human beings full of infinite dignity and worth, or are they not? Do we believe abortion is murder, or is it not? Is the preborn child worth the same protection as my 2-year-old, or are the preborn somehow less valuable? If we do not have the same due process in the law for those who pay to take the life of their children, then we as a movement are liars. We are saying that those in the womb do not have the same value as those outside of the womb. If I were to take the life of my 7-year-old, would you not call for justice? Then why is it different if I take the life of my preborn child? Because of his location, his age, his size? Surely not. Surely we are not that movement. Surely we are not a movement full of people who say one thing but legislate something different. Yes, we absolutely prosecute those who participate, all of those who participate. The doctors, the nurses, the parents who drive that young girl to the back alley facility, and if she was truly forced against her will, then she should not be prosecuted. That's due process. I am so thankful that God continues to shape and change our minds and hearts as we grow in Him. Let me say to all of you, it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to see things differently. In fact, if it brings you to a place where you are more consistently aligned in your fight against abortion, then I would say it's encouraged. Now is the time, more than ever, for our laws to reflect what this movement has always said: human life begins at conception. Let's act like it, friends. End quote. Isn't that powerful? This is from a woman. This is from a woman who ran a Planned Parenthood clinic. This is from a woman who described herself as aborting 2 of her own children, or as she put it in her words, she murdered 2 of her own children. And she's calling for due process. Why? Because if we say that a fetus is a person, then we must act like it. Because actions speak louder than words. What would a criminal process look like? People seem to forget that we have this entire justice system, and that every case should be decided on a case-by-case basis. That's how our justice system handles the homicide of any other person. Would you mind coming here, class? That's how. Can you set that up and grab one of those pads? Would you mind? One of those easel pads. Sorry, I put them away. I still want to use one. So we have homicide. You know, every case should be decided on a case-by-case basis. And I want to draw something out here. So pardon me, we're going to set up this easel pad real fast. It's my fault for putting it away. A lot of people aren't familiar with how the whole criminal justice system works, right? You think, oh, we're going to outlaw abortion, say that it's homicide. Well, then that means that everyone who has anything to do with abortion is going to get the death penalty. That's not really how the justice system works. In fact, the other day I was testifying to the Republican Party of Texas to a committee, and there was an actual prosecutor on the committee who was agreeing with me. And he was saying, yeah, there's 13,000 homicides of born people in the state over a certain period of time, and 50 of them had been prosecuted as capital homicide, capital murder, which allows for the death penalty in Texas. Right? It's a very small exception, even for murder of a born person. It's a very, very rare exception that gets to the point of someone being charged with capital murder. A homicide, you may not be aware, it can be charged in different ways. If you're a prosecutor, you can charge a homicide in different ways. You can charge it as first-degree homicide, or you can charge it as something less. Thank you, JR. Thank you, Matthew. You can charge it as something less. You could charge it as, let's see here, where's my notes? You could charge it as manslaughter, right, which would be in many places second-degree murder. You could charge it as criminally negligent homicide. Even though they may have had intent, it may be easier to prove a lesser intent. You can prosecute it as criminal conspiracy. You can prosecute it as assault, right? Because every murder includes an assault, right? The assault ends up causing the murder. Well, you could not prosecute the murder. You could just prosecute the assault part of the murder. You see what I'm saying? You could prosecute it as injury to a child, right? Because abortion is injury to a child. But it's murder, but it definitely includes injury to a child, which these are things that have much, much lower penalties and are much easier to prove. You could prosecute it as even a Class A misdemeanor, for example, in Texas, and Missouri has something similar, a charge of deadly conduct, right? Because certainly abortion is murder, but murder is also deadly conduct. You could prosecute it for that, which in Texas, for example, that could be a fine of $4,000 or $1. Or it could be prison of 1 year or even 1 day. See, a lot of people think when you prosecute, when you say abortion is murder, you're not saying that everyone who's involved with abortion is going to get the same prosecution, get the same charges, get the same outcome. That's not what you're saying. People, again, they think when you write these bills, like that's exactly what's going to happen. No, we have this entire justice system over here that allows for every case to be considered on a case-by-case basis. A judge could even give a defendant who pled guilty deferred adjudication, right? Have you ever gotten a traffic ticket and the judge said, listen, if you take defensive driving and don't get another one for a year, it'll go off your record. That's called deferred adjudication. They could do that. They could prosecute it that way and seek that. Or you could get probation, right? Don't do something for a year, it goes off your record. You don't have to do any jail time or pay a fine. Just stay out of trouble for a period of time. Or you could do community service. All of these things are allowed, even if we had equal protection and what that young woman did was murder when she did it, which it wasn't. But if it were, it could be prosecuted as all these things. She could get community service for what she did. That is allowed. There's a whole range of things that prosecutors then have the discretion about what they can pursue, and juries have discretion, and judges. Prosecutors could even choose to give that mother immunity to testify against the provider of the abortion pills or against an abortionist who does a back alley abortion. They could give her immunity to do that, or the prosecutor could choose not to pursue charges at all. Say, I don't want to pursue charges, or there's not enough evidence, or it's a more sympathetic situation. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to allow that. All of those things are possible under our criminal justice system. Also, in our criminal justice system, we have lots of presumptions, defenses, justifications, immunities, and clemencies. What do I mean by that? In our criminal justice system, we have presumptions that everybody here has probably heard of. We have a chief presumption, and that is you are presumed innocent until proven guilty. Right? That's every single criminal defendant coming into a courtroom or being prosecuted begins with that presumption. right? And if the government cannot overcome that presumption, the person gets to walk free. They may have actually done it, but the government didn't have enough evidence to convince a jury that they did. And you've got to convince a jury that they have a very high bar, and the government has to prove. You know what a lot of criminal prosecutions look like is the defense attorney not really doing a whole lot, because you don't have to put on a case. The state has to put on the case. They've got to prove. You don't have to disprove that you murdered anybody. They have to prove that you did. So you're already starting off, with the presumption on your side as a defendant. Then there are lots of defenses. Well, and first of all, and I'm sure you've heard this, you have a right to an attorney. If you can't afford one will be provided to you. The government will pay for your attorney to represent you in any criminal prosecution. There are also many defenses and justifications. There's something called mistake of fact. Like if a mother, for example, did not know what she was doing. That's mistake of fact. Mistake of the law is no excuse. You've probably heard that. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. But mistake of fact is. If you don't know what you're doing, right? If I were to fire a gun into some bushes and, there happened to be a person there, I didn't commit a crime unless I was being reckless or negligent, right? But I certainly haven't committed murder because I didn't know there was a person there, right? That's a mistake of fact. I made a mistake. I thought there wasn't a person and there was a person. Or maybe, sometimes I say, an example, if you're in the woods hunting bear and someone comes walking by and they're wearing a bear suit and you shoot them, you have not committed a crime. You genuinely thought it was a bear. You haven't committed a crime, right? You've made a mistake of fact. And there may be mothers who are making mistakes of fact. They think it's, not life, and it actually is life. Now again, how do you teach them that it is? Pass a law that treats it like it's a life. But if they still don't, then they have that defense, mistake of fact. There's a defense or justification for duress. If a mother is forced into an abortion. And what I'm telling you, these aren't new laws that would have to be created. These are laws that are already on the books today that apply to the homicide of a aborted person. If you have a mistake of fact, that's a defense. If you're under duress, if someone forces you to do something that, against your will, then there's a criminal defense of duress. And at least in Texas, even for the issue of murder. And I think there should be for the issue here of abortion. If a mother, if someone has a gun to her head, essentially, take these pills or I'll kill you, right? Then she's under duress. So there's a defense or justification for that. There's a defense for necessity. There's a legal doctrine of necessity that allows for what's sometimes called a choice of evils law, that in a life-threatening medical emergency, then something that would otherwise be prohibited could be allowed, or at least there would be a defense for it, like a mother in a life-threatening medical emergency. Again, these are existing laws that are already on the books in every state, or at least in the case law of every state. There are immunities. That is, if a prosecutor wants to, he can say, I'll give you an immunity to testify against this abortion doctor, or tell me where he's located, or whatever. Or they could force the mother to say, you have to testify against him, in which case she automatically gets immunity. You may be familiar with people pleading the fifth, I have a right not to incriminate myself. Well, the government can actually still force you to testify. They just have to give you immunity. Otherwise, you're incriminating yourself. But if they give you immunity, you're not, because you have immunity. So they could do that. There are also clemencies available. That is, in every state, the governor can ultimately exercise executive clemency. In our laws, we may not prosecute people for crimes or for actions that they did before something was a crime. So, for example, for right now in Texas, that woman, what she did was not illegal. So she could not be prosecuted. Even if we were to pass the bill of abolition, she still could not be prosecuted for what she did because it wasn't illegal when she did it. Right? It would be retroactive to try to prosecute her for something before it was illegal. And no one is calling for retroactive prosecution of mothers. That would be an ex post facto law. It's what it's called in most state constitutions, what's called in our U.S. Constitution, and it's prohibited in all those places. So the process of the justice system, I'm just going to move this over here. What did I do? I shouldn't have done that. They had it all nice and set up. I just ruined it. So the process looks like, whoa. I'm just putting on a show here. All right. So what most people aren't aware of, that I just want to spend a few minutes here, is what the justice system looks like. Again, because you think, oh, we passed a bill that says abortion's murder, so everybody gets, no. There's an entire justice system. What's up?
Yeah, can you slide that over?
There's an entire justice system that for every case to be considered on a case-by-case basis. So at the beginning of the justice system, we normally have someone makes a report, right? It's normally just a citizen that makes a report. They say, hey, I saw something suspicious, and they report it to whom?
The police.
They report it to the police. Thank you. I love interaction. They report it to the authorities. All right? You're going to see my drawing skills up here. Hey, how's that? So they report it to the police. And what do the police do? The police investigate, right? There's a magnifying glass. The police investigate the case. And they determine, is there probable cause to believe that a crime has been committed? And normally once they determine there's probable cause, to collect more evidence, now they have to go to a judge and get a judge to issue a warrant. They have to convince the judge, normally the justice of the peace, that there's probable cause to believe that a crime has been committed. Then the judge issues a warrant for them to continue their investigation, collecting evidence. Once they feel like they have enough, then they go to a prosecutor. Okay? Which this is the prosecutor here, and they have a tie on. Okay? So they go to a prosecutor, and they say, hey, we've got enough evidence. We think this is not the person. This is the reporter. We think this person committed a crime. The prosecutor, maybe tells them to go get some more evidence, or maybe they feel like there is enough evidence. If the prosecutor thinks there is enough evidence, then we're talking about a felony here when we're talking about murder. So they've got to go, in almost every situation, they have to then go to, does anybody know? Not to a jury yet, or it is a jury.
Grand jury.
Grand jury, all right? They've got to go to a grand jury. And they've got to convince that grand jury that there's probable cause to believe that a crime has been committed. And then the grand jury decides whether or not to indict. Indict is what it's called. And when they indict, it's called they issue a true bill. True bill that they believe that there's probable cause. So they go to a grand jury and they have to convince them. And the grand jury deliberates it behind closed doors. And then they say, yes, indictment. Okay, so now where do you go from a grand jury? Now the other side, once you have the indictment, okay, now you can arrest the person, right? You arrest them, you bring them in, you arraign them. At that point, the defendant's side, they're provided an attorney if they can't afford one, or they hire their own. Then they may try to get the case thrown out. Maybe the evidence, wasn't properly gathered and things like that. So they try to get the case thrown out by the judge. Okay, there's a gavel. So they try to get the case thrown out by a judge, but the judge says, no, we're going to, all the law has been followed so far, so we're going to let the case continue. All right, so then we move on to a trial. Okay, then at trial, then we're putting on the case in front of the jury, right? Jury of your peers. And you're putting the case on to them, and there's actually two parts to it. There's actually the first part, which is the guilt-innocence part of the phase of the trial. And that is, did they or did they not do this thing? Or really, it's not did they not. It's just did they do it? And if you can't say they did do it, then they're acquitted, right? You have to prove that they did do it. And now, up here, in order to investigate, you kind of have to have reasonable suspicion, and then you have to have probable cause to indict. And now at this level, in order to convict somebody of committing a crime, is an extremely high burden, is what we call it in the law. So you have to prove not just that a probable cause, not just preponderance of the evidence, not just what's called clear and convincing evidence, but you have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Beyond a reasonable doubt. I mean, that's a very high bar to prove that something happened. You have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. So that happens in the first phase. If the jury convicts, then you move on to the second phase of the trial, which is the sentencing phase. Then you can bring in all your character witnesses, say, well, this is a nice person, this is the first time they've ever done anything, and yada, yada, yada. And you get to hear kind of aggravating circumstances, like how heinous, you get to consider more how heinous the crime is and all that. And then mitigating circumstances, like, they were a nice person, they're married, they have children, things like that. The jury gets to consider all these things in deciding what the sentence should be. And then the jury then decides the sentence. All right, that then happens. From there, the judge, if the jury did something against what's called the great weight of the evidence, the judge could throw it out, or he could declare a mistrial and they could do it all over again. But assuming everything's gone properly, then you move on to the defendant will then appeal the case, right? And then when you appeal the case, that normally goes to a 3-judge panel in most places. Okay, now you have 3 judges who now consider everything that's gone on before and make sure it was all done lawfully. Then, if we're talking about murder, if we're talking about capital murder, you get an automatic appeal to your state's high court, to your state's high criminal court, which is normally something like 9 people. And again, if we're talking about capital murder, if someone's actually seeking the death penalty, you actually have an automatic appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. Okay, which that would be another times 9 over here. Then, in fact, I'm going to do it over here again, just so you get the idea here. Times 9 again. Then, guess what? Even if the U.S. Supreme Court says, nope, yep, all law was followed, there's something called habeas corpus appeals, which means you get to do all this all over again. Okay? This is why it takes so long for there to be, punishment carried out in these kind of cases. Well, let's say you work your way through all of that. Then at the very end, there is still someone who has the power to unlock, how's that? Unlock your jail cell and let you go. Who is that? The governor. The governor has the power to reduce your sentence, which is called commuting it, or to totally pardon you. Okay? So this is called our justice system. This is the justice system that protects the lives of born people. And as you can see, one of the main things that this justice system is designed to protect is the accused, right? It's designed to protect the accused. That's what we call due process. This is the process, and it's due process if it's enough process to reach a good result. This is the process that protects defendants, and this is the process that protects the lives of born people. All equal protection is it says that this justice system that protects the lives of born people should be the exact same justice system that protects the lives of people who are not yet born. That's all it is. So whenever someone says, oh no, you just want, no one's getting automatic anything. Every case has to be considered like this. And people are like, well, you're just going to give mothers a death penalty. Do you really think, and by the way, this has to be virtually unanimous among all these people, do you really think that this justice system in our country today is going to give any mother the death penalty? Or if they did, it would only be for the most extreme, heinous of case. That's the way it works in this country. So even if a prosecutor did pursue charges and a grand jury did indict and a judge did say law was followed, they did convict, they did sentence, they upheld all of it times 2, and then again, the governor could still commute their sentence or pardon them. Let's set this aside. So, abolition bills call for equal protection. But abolition bills don't control the outcomes of these investigations. If there is an investigation at all, abolition bills do not determine the charges, what they are. If there even are charges, abolition bills do not determine the guilt or the innocence or the sentence. Whether anyone involved with an abortion is investigated, prosecuted, convicted, or sentenced, and for what, if anything, would be up to the justice system that is already there to protect born persons, law enforcement, prosecutors, grand juries, judges, trial juries, appellate courts, and the governors. Even if charged, a guilty party could be convicted and sentenced to as little as 1 day in jail, or get deferred adjudication, or do community service, or even be granted complete immunity for testifying against the abortionist. Opponents of equal protection want to scare you into thinking that an abolition bill would automatically sentence every woman who gets an abortion to death, but that's just not true. Instead, equal protection would provide due process, and require case-by-case examination by a justice system that demands near unanimous agreement to punish anyone at all. That's all we're asking for. And why is this so important? Well, it's important because the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, as we've already read, requires it. No state shall deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. The protection by this same justice system. No state shall deny this to any person. Well, I believe a baby is a person. I believe that I was a person. I believe that my 10 children were persons. I believe that all of you were persons when we were in our mother's wombs. Our state representatives have a duty because they've sworn an oath of office to the U.S. Constitution. And guess what? Not only the U.S. Constitution, but most state constitutions also have an equal protection clause in there requiring the state to provide equal protection. Even if the U.S. Constitution didn't exist. But it does, and they swore oaths to both. They are bound by Romans 13, which says, let everyone be subject to the governing authorities. Well, in our country, what's the highest governing authority? Not the president, the Constitution. The Constitution is the highest governing authority. As it itself says, this Constitution and the laws which shall be made in pursuance thereof shall be the supreme law of the land. And the judges in every state bound thereby. That's what it says. That is the governing authority in this country because we're not a monarchy. We are a constitutional republic. When our officials swear an oath, they don't swear an oath to the Queen like people still do in England. They swear an oath to a constitution. Not to a person or an institution, but to a constitution, to a document that requires equal protection. This is so important because of logical consistency. How can we say that a fetus is a person, but we don't act like it? If we do that, our actions speak louder than words, and we are hypocrites. You know, in Texas, prior to slavery being abolished, we had a penal code that protected slaves or it protected everybody. But one part of it said, it was an article, or one section of it was just for justice for slaves and free persons of color, it said. And it said that if a slave or free person of color committed a certain crime, then they could be branded on their face in the shape of the letter C. But if a free white person, as it put it, committed this exact same crime, there was punishment, but they couldn't be branded on their face in the shape of the letter C. It was different. They got different justice. Now, the Penal Code said, well, slaves and free persons of color are persons, but they're peculiar persons, so they get different justice. Well, then you're not really treating them like they're persons. You're treating them like they are subhuman at that point, which is exactly what we do to children in the womb every time we pass a bill that says that mothers are allowed to do what that mother did with impunity. We're treating that little child as subhuman. This is important also because God's law requires it. God's law says to judges explicitly, you shall not show partiality in judgment. What is partiality? Deciding between the rich and the poor, right? In other words, not deciding a case based on the facts of the case and the evidence, but deciding it based on, well, this person's rich and this person's poor, or this person's pretty and this person's ugly. This person's a man, this person's a woman. Right? That's showing partiality. This person's born, this person's not born. That's showing partiality in judgment, which God hates. He hates partiality in not just judgment of homicide cases. The Bible says He even hates partiality in our weights and our measures. He hates unequal weights and measures. He hates it. They're an abomination to Him. How much more so when we use unequal weights and scales for the lives of human beings? He hates that. God demands that we do justice to the fatherless. That's what He demands. So, what is the purpose of equal protection? Genesis 9, when God, I believe, first institutes civil government, He says, He gave civil government their highest and first duty. And He said, whoever sheds man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God made He man. This is important not just because of the life of the child, but because of what is happening is the slaying of the image of God Himself in our land. And no one is exempt from justice for doing that. What is the purpose? To uphold the value of life. That's the purpose of having equal protection. That's the purpose of having laws against homicide. You know what? If we had our druthers, we would never, ever have to prosecute a homicide ever. Because the law would deter people from committing it in the first place. And there are many abolitionist women who've had abortions. And many of them I've heard from their own lips speaking to legislators and other officials and saying, I wish it had been illegal for me, and I never would have done it. Amen. I wish it had been illegal for me. The law lied to me. The pro-life law lied to me because it created these exemptions, exclusions that tell me it's not murder for me to do it. Just like our pro-life laws, even our trigger ban in Texas, even our pre-roll laws in Texas, lie to that woman and tell her that what she's doing is okay. So people say women are victims. Well, there are many who are true victims who are forced, like we said, that they shouldn't be prosecuted. But ladies like that are victims of our laws lying to them, our pro-life laws lying to them and saying that what they're doing is okay. We haven't been willing to say, no, it's not. Do we think that we're more compassionate than God, who requires justice? No, we're not. Even the compassion of the wicked is cruel. And that's how it is here. We're cruel, being cruel to her and to her child when we tell her that there's nothing illegal about what you just did. We need to follow the golden rule, which says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. What laws do you want protecting your life? What laws are protecting your life? Those should be the same laws, protecting the lives of children before they're born. That's the golden rule. The second greatest commandment, what James calls the royal law, you shall love your neighbor. Well, how do you know if you're loving your neighbor? As yourself. What laws protect you? You should want those same laws to protect your neighbor, or else you're not really loving them. Do you believe a fetus is a person? I do. And if you do, then we must act like it and provide them the equal protection of the laws. So help us God. Thank you.
Hey guys, thank you for watching. To see more content related to abolishing abortion, please like and follow this channel. To stay informed or find out how you can support the work to abolish abortion in Texas, visit our website at abolishabortiontx.org. With your support, we will continue to create content to bring greater awareness to this modern-day genocide and work to mobilize Christians to do something about it. We appreciate your support and help in sharing this content with your community of friends and family. Thank you, and God bless.